Tubi. It's the free streaming app that is full of absolute garbage, but a monster mess of failed TV shows and just absolutely awful movies you'll find for $2 at your local car wash DVD bin lies some truly incredible independent filmmaking.
I'm not even fucking joking, I'm fucking serious.
Today, I speak with Mr Schmidt of Acres Films, who wrote, directed, produced and edited Mr Sandman, a horror movie on Tubi that explores the primal fear of the dark.
Ralph's a little afraid of the dark, Bart. Is it okay to sleep with a nightlight?
Absolutely.
Good night, guys.
Mr Sandman is just one example of truly incredible independent filmmaking that's available on the streaming platform Tubi. But how do you find the hidden jewels amongst the tarnished gold? Let's find out together. This is the Complete Guide to Horror Movies podcast. But first, let's actually take a look at Tubi itself. Fans of this podcast will be aware of the hit TV show Bloody Famous, which I encourage you to check out on Tubi. Our interview with Wayne River Sorrell, an actor who was featured in that TV show, is linked in the description.
Guess we'll see.
Tubi is home to some just truly outrageously bizarre TV shows and movies. I mean, they've got everything from true crime to 90s anthologies like Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, one of my absolute favourite TV shows of all time. I don't care how dated it is today. Beyond Belief is just incredible, and Jonathan Frakes must be in every single movie, TV show ever from now on.
Was this story based on a real event? Yes, it's true.
There's also medical mysteries, creature features, and yes, even Titanic 2 and Titanic 666. What the actual fuck?
Look out! Behind you!
We'll return for the remainder of the conclusion after these messages.
I love opening the Tubi app and just finding some completely wacky B-grade horror movie that isn't available on Netflix, Stan, for Australians, Disney Plus, or Paramount Plus. Likewise, I appreciate the legacy content with 90s TV gems made for TV movies and the strong horror catalogue. Yet, despite the legacy content and incredible independent movies, these are far and few in between all the truly terrible content that Tubi loves to offer. A quick scroll shows absolute chaos, from disaster action movies to F-grade comedies, Z-grade horrors and the like. And let me remind you, back when Tubi first launched, this was even more scattered than ever. But Tubi is free. And let's remember, Netflix and other streaming services also have steaming piles of crap littered amongst their so-called originals. Tubi seamlessly fits in with their variety of offerings.
Is Netflix streaming the right choice for you? Well, if you like movies in HD, then frozen pixels, then HD again, the answer is yes. And if you love the golden year of movies, 2003, then we might have some of what you're looking for. Netflix streaming. Buffer for 20 minutes, then watch 35 minutes of a movie with Jason Statham.
Now, as mentioned at the start of this podcast episode, one horror movie that stuck out to me was Mr Sandman, a 2024 independent horror film by the production company Acres Films. Director, writer, producer, and editor Mr Schmidt has crafted a terrifying film that calls back to our fear of the dark. And quite frankly, this actually hits the beats of what made the dark scary. Not like that other movie, Skinamarink, which was an absolute fucking snooze fest. Sorry, Skinamarink fans, but I can't defend that movie anymore. I was lucky to chat with Matthew on the inspiration and the making behind of Mr Sandman.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Complete Guide to Horror Movies podcast. You and I have been talking through TikTok. You sent me your film, Mr. Sandman, which is on Tubi. Interesting facts, though, a lot of Tubi movies that are in America usually aren't on Tubi in Australia because it's a different country. So what we find is that we get a lot of submissions, but often it'll be on a different streaming platform compared to where it is in America. So it might be on a very niche streaming platform here in Australia, or it might be on one of our pay TV providers or cable providers. But I was very happy to see that Mr. Sandman was actually here. So I thought, great, I can actually review this. I can lock in an interview. Before we get into Mr. Sandman, tell us about yourself and your company, Acres Films.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me, first of all. It's an honor and a pleasure. Acres Films. Acres Films started because I wanted to build a brand because I had primarily started screenwriting.
Nice.
And anyone who knows anything about screenwriting knows it is an extremely difficult business to get anyone to take the time,
Oh,
read your
yes.
work, review it, screenplays. Agents don't want to hear from you, but you need an agent for a production company to talk to you. So, as a no-namer, I just wasn't getting read anywhere.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, the traditional route of me trying to reach agents, managers is not working. I came across a local or a horror film that I was watching, and about 5 minutes into it, he mentions the local electricity company near me.
Ah,
So I was like, oh, okay. And this was on Amazon Prime. So I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, this guy's local. So I reached out to him. I picked his brain a little bit, and he kind of walked me through the process of how Amazon Prime, at least at that time, we're talking about 2018,
mm,
was accepting independent films from people. I was like, wow, really? So he walked me through the process. I made one, then I made another, and then the pandemic hit, so I stopped
yeah,
doing anything. And I was like, well, what can I do that's small and contained and I can do within my own house?
yeah.
So I uh, I, I basically came up with the idea of Mr. Sandman, and we filmed that, and we filmed that. Took about 3 years because it was my first cinematic style.
Yeah.
Previously, I'd only done found footage, which was a lot, at least technically speaking, easier to execute. But with cinematic, if you watch any movie, you watch 60 seconds of a movie, there's 12 different shots. Now imagine you have to set up each and every
Mm,
one of those shots, the lighting,
yeah.
multiple takes. So cinematic style takes a lot longer. But so Acres filmed, I wanted to use to build a brand for myself that, God willing, it gets big enough. I have some weight behind me, whereas like I could be like, okay, oh, you like my film? Great. I also have a couple screenplays you might like.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll lead to something like that.
Excellent, excellent. With the screenplay process, so I'm based in Australia. Our film industry is severely lacking, especially when it comes to horror. We tend to do the same Wolf Creek style horror movie every 5 years, and it never makes any money, doesn't go anywhere. Our industry is very much a you need to know every single person in order to get noticed or get recognized. But the problem is they're too afraid of actually expanding their horizons. So we haven't had a successful horror movie since I think The Tunnel, which was 2011. And even then, that didn't actually make that much money. We've got other filmmakers like Daniel Michael Philippou who did Talk to Me. That was filmed in South Australia, but it's not technically an Australian production because it was financed, made by A24. So I feel your pain, especially because I've written some screenplays, especially for movies, anthologies, TV shows, where, I haven't necessarily taken that step to try and get things made, especially because I'm always rewriting certain things. But I always think, how do I get this made, and how do I actually find an agent? How do I find the right person, especially in Australia? In my mind, I thought America would be a bit easier, but after talking to a lot of different filmmakers, I think America's a lot harder to break into.
I mean, I can't speak to the Australian market, so I don't know how
Mm,
difficult it is. I just know that our market. Someone once showed me a meme of a
yeah,
of an agent's office, and it was the window, his office window, and it was stacked like a good 4 feet high of screenplays. And he said, "This is what they receive every month, so don't be
yeah,
upset if if you don't get read." Basically, to me, I think the way to actually break into this business, from at least from what I've seen, is to you have to make a name for yourself.
yeah,
So that's the, if you will, the alternate route that I'm trying, you know. So it's just tough everywhere because it's an industry where everybody would like to be, you know, to a certain extent. And it's just a very hard industry to get into because it's so coveted and there's so much competition out there.
Oh yeah, and especially what I find is that horror filmmakers in particular these days, the only traditional success story that I can think of at the moment is Parker Finn, who did Smile 1 and Smile 2. He had a short film called Laura Hasn't Slept, which won all these short film awards. Then he got a feature film deal with Paramount Pictures based on that successful short film. But at the same time, and I'm not disregarding that short film, it's great, but there's a lot of other horror short films that I think, well, why didn't this lead to a feature film deal with Paramount or with New Line Cinema or things like that? I've seen case studies where the producers of the new Final Destination Bloodlines movie, they did this Zoom pitch where they actually faked their own deaths in line with what that movie's all about. And I thought, all right, that's creative. Maybe that's why they got that pitch in the end, because something crazy like 200 writer directors pitched for that movie. But then I also think, but there's something nice and just charming about the non-traditional grassroots viral campaigns, which I've seen a few of on TikTok. Mr Sandman, for instance. I've also seen one for The Demon Inside, which has a bit of a complicated history with this filmmaker who unfortunately only just regained control of his completed script, his completed production, and now he's launched this grassroots campaign, which is great. Just it does require a lot of extra effort that I don't think the average horror enjoyer would necessarily even know about what happens behind the scenes. So with that in mind, what was the inspiration behind Mr. Sandman?
The inspiration behind Mr. Sandman was basically that it was one of the first lessons I learned when I was trying to learn screenwriting. It was this brilliant book on screenwriting called Save the Cat, and it didn't teach you so much it didn't teach you the structure of a screenplay. It more taught you how to write so that it would be interesting no matter what your subject matter was. One of the first lessons it taught was make it primal. Make it so that no matter what, it has an element to it that almost everyone can relate to, just being a human. So I was like, okay, well, and primal is such a key element in horror because you want to hit those primal chords in people. If you're talking about something like my favorite movie of all time, not just horror, but my favorite movie of all time being Jaws, it hits that primal chord of being eaten alive. That's something that goes back to like our caveman days and our DNA, where it's like we still have that fear. So I'm like, okay, well, what's another primal fear? I said, well, this is easy, fear of the dark. Yeah. Because no matter what, even if you grow out of it, when you're a child, you have a fear of the dark because it's not the dark itself. It's what you start to see in the dark if you stare at it long enough. So I'm like, okay, let me make fear of the dark. Let me make it from a child's perspective and let me make it so that it plays on that and that theater of the mind to keep the audience engaged so that they're always looking in the dark. They're thinking, did I hear what I just heard or did I see what I just saw? And it also, but I had to also follow, I'm sorry, my dogs are fighting, play fighting. I also had to follow Hitchcock's advice was, yes, the suspense is the key, but you have to have a legitimate threat at the end of the suspense to make the suspense count. So I was like, okay, I have to put a legitimate threat in the dark. What can that be? And sorry, I apologize. The answer was kind of clear as day. I'm like, well, what are kids afraid of? I'm like, well, the boogeyman's been kind of done to death. So let me use Mr. Sandman instead. It's a story everybody's heard of, everybody can relate to. So that was kind of the origins of the idea.
Nice, nice. And I will say, watching Mr. Sandman, I'm someone who's watched, well, God, at this stage, probably thousands of horror movies. Everything from like Australian to European, Japanese, Asian cinema, short films, YouTube shorts, everything. There was some really scary parts of Mr. Sandman that caught me off guard. But one thing that I noticed was that there was that use of suspense. And I thought, finally, there's a Tubi movie where it's not just lazy jump scares put together, because there's some that I've seen, and I mean it's part of the charm with Tubi as well, where there's some first time filmmakers where they might think, let me just put a loud noise and that's it. Whereas with Mr. Sandman, there was a lot of great suspense building up with, oh, what did I just see that? What was that was behind the character that your daughter plays? And then that one scene towards the middle where she's in the bed and she's got the blanket over herself, and you can hear the music start to ratchet up a little bit, and you can hear just the panic and the fear, and then all of a sudden it's the giant jump scare. And I was watching it on my computer with my headphones. I went, fuck, and I had to take the headphones off, and I thought, all right, this is good. And not to like demean any other horror movies that are on Tubi, because there's a huge, great selection of them, but Mrs. Sandman did catch my eye. And so, yeah, huge credit to yourself.
I'm so glad. Oh, thank you so much. That's such a great compliment. No, I'm glad that the suspense landed on you the way it was intended to. Because, like I said, with Hitchcock, he made it clear that horror is in the suspense, and the kills or scare is just there to show that the suspense has an actual threat. So he said, it's definitely the suspense, because that's the part that you start to bring your own fear on the suspense part. When it's just the jump scare and there's not a lot of buildup, it's kind of like it's all packaged for you and you don't have to do any work with your mind.
Yeah. That imagination part of it. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, where a lot of horror movies these days tend to rely on having no suspense. There's nothing in it for the viewer themselves. And we're talking about mainstream horror movies like Blumhouse Productions, for instance. We love to just make fun of their movies all the time, because it's a perfect example of what not to do with a horror movie, but somehow these producers keep getting away with it. But that primal fear of the fear of the dark. So I'm someone who, as a kid, was absolutely terrified by the dark, probably because I watched a lot of horror movies as a kid, but even at my age of 32, there are still plenty of times where I'll turn all the lights off in my house, and then when it comes to the last light, I have to run. And I think, why am I still running at 32 years old? This is so stupid. And I know it's stupid, but it's that primal fear of being in the dark. And there's some other horror movies in recent years which do tap into that childhood fear. One prominent example being Skinamarink, where I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it follows the concept of this younger brother and sister. I think they're supposed to be 4 to 6 years old. It's about this. In all honesty, there's so many interpretations of that movie. It could be about a demon that's messing around with all the kids, or it could be about a hallucination. But it taps into that fear of the dark as well. But what I found was that Skinamarink was actually just quite boring for the rest of the time. It would have 20 minutes of nothing, no suspense build up, nothing, and then giant jump scare. And then one pivotal scene which actually has some suspense, but it was a bit too late to save that movie. So yeah. I don't know. I think this primal fear aspect is just such a gold mine that you've hit.
Yeah, well, again, thank you. I'm glad I did my job correctly. Well, first of all, don't feel bad about still hitting that last light and running, because for me personally, you said 32. I am exactly 29 days from turning 50, and I still, no matter what bedroom I'm sleeping in, I cannot sleep with the door open, because if the door's, that's what I get for my dogs. Stop. If the door's open, I will look into that open space and I will see something. So I
Yeah.
have to sleep with the door shut every time.
Carmela, can you please shut the door?
I think people who sleep with the door open are psychopaths, because I'll be laying in bed and I think, like, I just need to shut this door. And then I meet some people who are the complete opposite. They're afraid unless the door is open, then they can sleep peacefully. And I think, you can do that? I can't. I'm going to look and I'm going to see a face in the dark, and I know nothing's there, but my mind is going to pretend there's something there, and I'll freak myself out.
And here's a picture even you can figure out. It's a door! Use it!
That's a door?
Mr. Sandman has a unique behind-the-scenes feature where, after the credits, there's a conversation with yourself, the producer, Brandon Berkeley, and the cast and crew. Now, I hadn't seen this before with any other movies, and I actually really love this approach, because to me, it makes it more immersive, because it's like, oh, well, you know, we never see behind the scenes, especially with the rise of streaming. We talk all the time in this podcast about how special features on DVDs and Blu-rays haven't been transferred to places like Netflix or Amazon Prime, which is such a shame, because, I mean, there's some movies like, you know, random one, Final Destination 3 has like 12,000 hours of extra, like, special features. And this one I consider a special feature. How did you come up with that approach to add the interview to the movie?
I'm like yourself. I'm a huge fan of, well, I have a ton of physical media, especially with movies that I love. I am a huge fan of makings, behind the scenes, all that stuff. So I was like, you know, you can't really put it on streaming. So I'm like, well, but I'm like, you know, there still seems like there's something here. So I'm like, okay, we'll put it at the end of the credits.
Yeah.
That way, if people want to watch it, they can stick with it. If they don't want to watch it, it's at the end of the movie. It's not like it's before the credits, or I'm sorry, before the movie or anything. So they don't have to sit through it. And it's just, it's something they can easily turn off if they just don't want to deal with it. So I guess I did it for people like me, movie lovers like me that love that behind the scenes stuff. You know, sometimes a fun story thrown in, you know, whatever the case may be, just to show that, like, you know, I don't know. I always find them interesting. So I thought there might be people who find it interesting. And again, because it's at the end of the credits, if not, they can simply just turn it off.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something too which I wish more filmmakers would use, especially because I think it's such a good marketing tool, also a really great pitch case tool, where if I'm a random producer, Hollywood director, or whatever, and I'm watching this movie on Tubi, my first instinct would be, okay, this is a really great horror movie. How can I get involved with the next project? And then I see the behind the scenes of it. It makes it more personable. It makes me think, oh, I actually really want to work with this director. His cast and crew are great. There's that human element to it. So it's just such a genius stroke of marketing that I hadn't seen on any other movie before. So I thought, let me point this out, because I'd love for more people to take this up.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great trend to catch on. You know, again, because I'm a movie lover, I want to know, you know, I would love to hear stuff about behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Also, I just realized your dog's a husky.
Yeah, one of them is a husky and the other one's a hound mix.
Oh, nice.
And they've decided to both come in here at the same time and play fight while I'm trying to speak. So that's there's the price of being a dog owner. When they decide to play, they just decide to play, and that's what they're gonna do.
Ray! That's me!
Indie filmmaking is quite often disregarded by the mainstream film industry, but horror genre fans are always lapping up indie filmmaking, whether it be ARG, which is augmented reality. There's some really fascinating stuff on YouTube about that. There's also the ongoing love for B-movie monsters, creature features, splatters, etc. There's that real rich history behind horror and the love for independent filmmaking, more so compared to any other genre. Do you have any opinions as to why you think that might be?
You know, I think it's funny because I think the tide is somewhat turning. in that regard. And I'm just going to point to the success of the Terrifier franchise for that. Terrifier 3 absolutely exploded at the box office.
Oh, yeah.
And if there's one thing I've learned about Hollywood is they love being copycats of each other. So they'll say, oh, this worked. Okay. Let us make 10 more just like it. So they'll look at something that costs, they're like, wow, Terrifier 3 cost $2 million. And I haven't checked the box office in a while, but at last I looked, it was 90 million.
Yeah.
So, and that's just in the States. And that's like a no-brainer for a studio. Because you got to remember, studios, as a creative, we always like to think that studio heads are like us, but they're not. They just, it's a business, and that's nothing against them. It's just, hey, we're here to make money. We're a business. Okay, great. Anything that costs $2 million and makes $90 million is a no-brainer. So I feel like, and I hope I'm right, they're going to start looking more towards indie horror and be like, hey, okay, this started clearly as an indie horror thing. What other marketable franchises are out there that we can maybe grab from the indie horror market that would, that we can turn a profit on? So, but if you think about, like, almost all horror somewhat started in like an indie way. Craven, I believe, I'm not sure if it was his first film, but if you look at Last House on the Left, that was very much like an indie production. Or if you look at something like like Blair Witch and found footage, that's obviously indie. Found footage is a very, again, I'm not going to say it's simple because that'd be disrespecting the genre, because no matter what, it's hard to make something scary. But it's an easy way to get into filmmaking on a very limited budget.
Hello, I like money.
Just to bring up your point about the Blair Witch Project, I look at the Blair Witch Project as such a really fascinating case study of independent filmmaking versus the studio system. Because the first Blair Witch Project came out in 1999, was made for, figures differentiate, the overall production value I think was like less than $10,000 originally, and then Artisan Entertainment bought it, gave it a $2 million marketing budget, I think, with the internet and everything back when that was still, growing in its infancy, became this huge box office juggernaut where it was one of the most profitable movies of all time, the most profitable horror movie. Then we had Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows, which had so much studio involvement that that movie, personally, I love that movie, but I know that it's not what people were expecting. So that had a decline in critical and commercial value. But then there's a 2016 Blair Witch reboot, which was, I can't remember the production company behind it, but essentially they took what was great about the original Blair Witch, even with the marketing, and flipped it on its head, so it became just such a bad rip-off remake. The marketing was terrible, except for the one reveal where they had marketed it as The Woods, and then at Comic-Con, I think it was, or maybe a horror convention, they flipped it and it was actually the premiere of the Blair Witch movie. No one else had known that it was a Blair Witch sequel, but I remember seeing it in theaters and being like, what the shit was this? Like, it was so bad. And you just think, if they left it to the indie filmmakers, it would have been such a huge success. But because they've got all these studio heads that are putting in their 2 cents every 5 seconds saying, change this, change that, we don't like this character, make this person more of a stereotype, for instance, like, it just loses that charm and it loses what makes it entertaining. And I know there's other instances where there's some movies which, with the involvement of studio heads, it does become a better movie, but I find that's quite rare. So I think just leave it up to the indie filmmakers, because that's where all the gold is.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and it's hard finding that balance, because you have every once in a while you'll come like somebody will come along and make like this groundbreaking film, and then the studio wants to get involved because they see dollar signs, and then they there's too many cooks in the kitchen and they're not letting one voice be heard. And, but on the flip side, it's not, I mean, most of my favorite movies are studio movies. So I can't say that studios are necessarily a bad thing either. Yeah. It's just that it's something I've always told my friends. I've always had this discussion with them, and I always plant my flag on this argument that movies, to me at least, are the greatest art form known to man. And the reason I say that is it's not, you don't just have to make one good thing. Like a sculptor has to do one thing, a musician has to do one thing. You're taking all the elements of art that I can think of: acting, photography, music, lighting, if you count graphic artists as like, painters almost, like in special effects. If you take all those elements, you not only have to make each one good, but you have to marry them in a way that they marry in a harmonious way to create a good product. So even if you think about it, it's like the same movies always come up when you talk about the greatest movies. And if you're talking about the horror genre, what are like the 4 or 5 films that always come up? Jaws, The Exorcist, Shining, Halloween, like those always come up because it's really hard to make a good movie. Yeah. So it's like, and that's why those stay at the top of everyone's list for not years, but decades, and for good reasons.
At the Complete Guide to Horror podcast, we're about to hit our big double milestone. That's right, we're about to hit our 100th episode and also our 3-year anniversary. And to celebrate, we're giving away our first ever mega physical media prize pack. So what does this include? One lucky winner will receive 56 Blu-rays, 15 DVDs, 4 Funko Pops, and 2 colognes. Everything from 4K new releases like Late Night with the Devil, The Substance, Pearl, the Scream trilogy, and everything to cult classics and fan favourites that we've covered right here on this channel. So how do you enter to win? Simple. Follow us or subscribe to us on any of the platforms. These include YouTube, Spotify, Apple, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Or X, whatever. It's called Twitter, who fucking cares? And like this video on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this on. It's that simple. If you would like extra entries, simply share this episode to your story or comment below what your favourite horror movie is and why. The winner will be drawn on our 100th episode on April 16. Good luck, and thank you for supporting us over the past 3 years. Your support means the world to us. I'm someone who hates disaster movies because they scare me too much. Like, anything like, I don't know, Day After Tomorrow, Deep Impact, all those tsunami movies freak me the fuck out. I can't watch them. And then there's some other, I don't know if I'd call them gems per se, but there's definitely a lot of movies where they might have been featured in like our video rental stores or DVD rental stores back in like the 2000s, 2010s, which are now on Tubi, like 237 Degrees, where people are locked into a sauna. There's also like Lake Placid 3, just like random sequels. But I do want to point out with Tubi, I don't know if this is the same for America. The TV show list is absolutely phenomenal. I saw some TV shows on there that I hadn't seen since maybe the 90s or 2000s, like Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, which terrified me as a child. That whole TV show, I'm obsessed with it. And I'm rewatching it now, and I just think this whole 90s TV aesthetic to it, where I know it was broadcast on Fox in America, but it's got that, like, not even vintage, just like late 90s, like cheesy charm to it, where these filmmakers had like half a day to film this 8 to 10 minute segment, and they're doing the best they can with the limited budget they've got. But even just the host with Jonathan Frakes is just so phenomenal. And I see the memes all the time online, and I think that's where that's from. So yeah, I really encourage everyone to check out Tubi because you will be very surprised.
Yeah, Tubi has really exploded in the last couple of years. And I think I did see something that they are the fastest growing streaming service at the moment. And they're coming out with a lot more originals. And just they're killing it with the documentaries right now, like just one after the other. A ton of you know, serial killer documentaries too, which always fascinate me. They're just they've really exploded in like the last like 2 years, and it's been a treat. It really has. And plus, there's all these movies now that I put on my Tubi list because it was like when I was younger, it was like, you know, you would see all these covers in the video store, but they were like, you know, considered lower brow, you know, or like less like cheap carbon copies of the tentpole franchises, like, you know, Friday the 13th or, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street. And you see all these like cheaper versions of them, and then now I get to play catch up on all these video like covers that I used to see in the video store. I never bothered to rent, and it's like they have a great selection of like 70s and 80s like what's considered lower brow like slasher and horror films, and they're just so much fun to watch. It's so entertaining.
Oh yeah. I love Tubi. I can't talk enough about it. Now, final question. I know you already mentioned that Jaws was your favorite horror movie of all time. Do you have perhaps a second favorite horror movie of all time?
Yeah, well, it's funny because with Jaws, I just call it my favorite movie of all time. But you know, but it is, you know, I know there is a very famous argument out there whether it's a horror or not, because some people consider it a little more of a summer blockbuster than a horror. Which, again, I understand the argument for both, but if you know anything about Alfred Hitchcock, that is very much a Hitchcock-style horror that Spielberg put out. You know, so it is a horror. However, if you're talking just pure horror, no controversy whatsoever about what it is, The Exorcist is my favorite.
Yeah,
of all time.
I saw The Exorcist. It sounds so horrible, but I've spoken about this on the podcast before. My older sister and I think I was 10 years old, she was 15. We bullied my mum into letting us watch The Exorcist because she would talk all the time. I mean, she let us watch some horror movies as a kid, but it was always appropriate, even for like a 8, 9, 10-year-old. And I remember she would always talk about The Exorcist and say, "Oh, it was the most terrifying movie of all time," and "Oh, I'm so scared." And I think, all right, well, can we watch it? Like, this sounds great. And then the poor thing, she ended up getting, it was the version you were never meant to see. It was like the re-release 20, 25 years after it got released. And there were some extra scenes like
2000 that came out.
Yeah, that tracks. I think I would have been 8 or 9 then. And the part where she's spider walking down the stairs, but they added the extra shot of the blood coming out of the mouth. I remember seeing that and thinking, okay, just completely caught me off guard. And I didn't appreciate it then, but I remember laughing as a kid and thinking, this is not scary in the slightest. I don't know what my mum's going on about. And then upon further rewatches, it is genuinely a scary movie, taking into consideration that this is all about possession. You've got the factions between religious beliefs and, look, I don't know, you've seen the recent one, Exorcist Believer. That was absolute garbage compared to like the original, The Exorcist 3.
I did see it. I did see it.
I wish I could unsee it. It was, I just remember being in the theater and being like, okay, they brought Linda Blair back. They brought back, I always forget her name, the older character, the mum of Regan. And I thought, oh, where is this going to go? And then out of nowhere, they just blind the old character. And I thought, where is this movie going? And then it was just so badly done. And I thought, even...
Yeah, I was disappointed. I was definitely disappointed.
Yeah. I mean, the good news is that Mike Flanagan is directing a new... I don't know if it's a remake again or if it's a sequel or something, but Mike Flanagan is doing a new Exorcist movie, so I'm hoping that'll be good.
Well, I believe he did Dr. Sleep.
Yeah.
And I was the Shining is just below The Exorcist for me. And I was very pleasantly surprised with Doctor Sleep, because I'm like, okay, I'll see it. You know, I want to check it out. Looks interesting enough, but I'm not expecting too much. I mean, we're talking about The Shining here, you know. And I went in and I came out. I was very pleasantly surprised. I'm like, you know what? That was all in all a very solid film.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm surprised that he did it so well, because I've read a lot of Stephen King books, but The Shining to me is one of his best, like absolute top 3 books of all time. The movies, I mean, there's the miniseries in 1997 and the Kubrick one. I know that a lot of people are divided on those movies, so I won't say too much. But I remember the books. I read The Shining, and then I read Doctor Sleep when it came out, and I thought Doctor Sleep was a bit of a snooze fest in terms of writing. So I wasn't expecting much from the movie either. And how he tied it in so that it was still Doctor Sleep as per the book, but it was also a sequel to Kubrick's The Shining was just such a genius move. And yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, I mean, look, I never, these days it's hard for me to get expectations too high for anything, but you know, look, if you make a good movie, whether it's a sequel, a reboot, you know, I know a lot of people don't like reboots, but if you make a good movie, you make a good movie. You know, I mean, it's such a shame that Exorcist 3 gets lost in that shuffle, because to me, you know, I'll just say it, the most underrated horror movie I've ever seen by far.
Absolutely.
I can't believe how brilliant that movie is. And there are certain times throughout the movie where it actually rivals the original. And that's an impressive feat. So, yeah.
Exorcist 3 took me a while to watch because I saw the first one, then I saw the second. that was an experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, the third one, I would always see it at my video DVD shop. And I think, oh, there's a third one. Why haven't I heard about this? And then actually got around to watching it. And even just the first 5-10 minutes where it's just it's always known as one of the most surprising jump scares of all time with the sights. Yeah, that shocked me. I didn't expect that. And then I thought, all right, I'm in for a good ride, I hope. But I did see Exorcist 2, so maybe it won't be as good. But yeah, very pleasantly surprised. So yeah, I think The Exorcist is due for another great film. So hopefully Mike Flanagan can pull it out.
I hope so, because I mean, what did I say? I saw Exorcist the beginning, and then I saw the second version of that, which was called Exorcist Dominion, which was the same film done by 2 different directors, which was a very weird situation. But you know, and then I was like, okay, well, they were both watchable. They were both okay. And then nothing all the way up until Exorcist Believer, which disappointed me. And now we wait.
Excellent. Now, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can our followers find you on TikTok, Instagram? Do you have a handle?
Yeah. Acres Films is the handle, and it's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, YouTube, and last but not least, I don't know, not too many people know about this, but there's a site and a social media site for horror fans exclusively called Slasher, and I'm Acres Films on there as well.
Thank you to Matthew from Acres Films. Make sure you follow Acres Films on all the platforms. Links are in the description below. And please check out Mr Sandman. It's available right now on Tubi. Tag Acres Films in your reviews. Thanks for tuning in to the Complete Guide to Horror Movies podcast. We'll see you next time.